You never really know who someone is until they show you their true colors, and for me, that moment came at the grandest Christmas party in Greenwich. We'd prefer if you left. Amanda's voice sliced through the elegant holiday chatter like ice, her designer gown glittering beneath the chandelier as her eyes scanned me with disdain. My hands were still rough and dirty from helping a stranger with her broken-down car. My simple dress, wrinkled from the December cold, felt embarrassingly out of place. I had arrived 30 minutes late to my son-in-law's mansion, hoping for a little grace, but instead, I found only contempt. If you're watching this, make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. But first, let me take you back because this is the story of how a 64-year-old woman named Margaret Sullivan ended up being humiliated at the most exclusive Christmas party in Greenwich, Connecticut. It's a story about family, pride, and how sometimes the strangers you help on the side of the road can change everything. 3 months earlier, I was living quietly in my small apartment, stretching every penny of my modest pension. My husband, Frank, had passed 5 years ago, leaving me with just enough to survive but never enough to thrive. Then one afternoon, my son David called with news that should have made me happy. "Mom, Amanda's family wants to meet you, really. Meet you this time." His tone had that careful edge, like he was tiptoeing on eggshells. "They're having their annual Christmas party and they specifically asked me to invite you." After 3 years of marriage, David's wife Amanda had hardly acknowledged my existence. The Whitmans were Connecticut royalty, old money, old traditions, and unfortunately, very old attitudes about people like me. Amanda's grandmother had built a business empire, and every gathering of theirs felt more like a corporate boardroom than a family dinner. A boardroom where I had no qualifications. "That's wonderful, honey," I said, though something in David's voice made me wary. He hesitated. "Well, Amanda's been talking to her grandmother about family, about how important it is to include everyone, just maybe dress nicely. You know how they are about appearances." Oh, I knew. Amanda always looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect everything. Meanwhile, I shopped at discount stores and cut my own hair to save money. But still, this was my chance to finally be part of David's new life, to prove I wasn't the embarrassment they thought I was. So I said yes. I couldn't have known that this decision would lead me to that humiliating night or to a roadside encounter that changed everything. The truth is, my relationship with the Whitmans had been complicated from the very beginning. David met Amanda during his residency at Yale Hospital, and I could tell immediately she came from a different world. The first time she visited my apartment, she looked around at the second-hand furniture and outdated appliances with thinly veiled disgust. "It's very cozy," she had said, but her tone made it clear that cozy was just her polite word for cheap. I tried to win her over with home-cooked meals, stories, genuine interest in her life. But Amanda had already labeled me David's poor mother. Nothing I did could change that. Their wedding was my first real glimpse of what life with the Whitmans would be like. It was a lavish affair at their Greenwich estate, costing more than I'd made in 5 years. I wore my best dress, a navy blue gown I'd bought for Frank's funeral, and felt like a sparrow surrounded by peacocks. Amanda's mother, Patricia Whitman, introduced me around as David's mother from New Haven, not by name, just by geography, as though I were some distant relative they were obliged to acknowledge. But it was Amanda's grandmother, Eleanor Whitman, who caught my attention most. Elegant in the way only the very wealthy can be, she had sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. While Amanda made her sound out of touch, Eleanor clearly saw more than she let on. "Your grandmother seems very sharp," I told Amanda that day. "Grandmother keeps her opinions to herself, mostly," she replied carefully. "She lets Dad handle the business decisions. Lets, not can't or doesn't." That one word told me more than Amanda intended. But family dynamics in their world were unlike anything I knew. After the wedding, David and Amanda moved to Connecticut to be closer to her family. Visits became less frequent, phone calls shorter when I did see them. David acted like a translator between two different cultures, mine and theirs. The few times I attended their dinners, I was seated at the far end of the table, treated politely, but always kept at arm's length. Conversations revolved around business mergers, country club events, and European vacations, topics I could listen to but never join. David tried to bridge the gap. "Mom, maybe you could take an interest in Amanda's charity work or ask Patricia about her garden club." But I could tell even he knew it was a losing battle against Amanda's subtle, relentless campaign to keep me on the outside. So, when David called with that Christmas party invitation, I was more than surprised. Maybe, just maybe, Amanda was finally ready to accept me as part of the family. Or perhaps her grandmother had encouraged her to be more inclusive. Looking back, I should have recognized the invitation for what it really was. The week before the Christmas party, I threw myself into preparation like it was the most important exam of my life. In many ways, it was. This felt like my final test, my one chance to be accepted into David's new world. I spent a full days hunting for the right dress. It had to look expensive but still fit within my budget at Nordstrom Rack. The saleswoman patiently listened as I explained, I need something for a very formal Christmas party. The kind where everyone has money and silently judges you by your clothes. She found me a burgundy dress with delicate beading, originally to $100 but marked down to $65. It wasn't designer, but it looked respectable. I paired it with matching shoes that pinched my feet and a small purse that coordinated perfectly. That week, David called me twice with little reminders. Mom, remember Amanda's family is traditional. Stick to safe topics, nothing political or controversial. I laughed softly. Honey, I've been having dinner conversations since before you were born. I think I can manage not to offend anyone. I know, he sighed. It's just Amanda's been really stressed about this party. Her entire extended family will be there, plus her father's business associates. She wants everything to go perfectly, including me, apparently. The unspoken message was clear. Don't embarrass us. The night before the party, I even practiced conversations in my bathroom mirror. How to answer questions about my work history. How to deflect talk about my small apartment. How to sound politely interested in topics I knew nothing about. I asked my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, if she could check in on my cat. Big family gathering? She asked. The biggest. I said with a nervous smile. My sons-in-laws are very wealthy, very proper. This is my chance to finally be part of their family. Mrs. Chen, who had immigrated from Taiwan 40 years ago and knew what it was like to struggle to fit into new worlds, squeezed my hand. Just be yourself, Margaret. If they can't see your worth, that's their loss. But being myself hadn't worked for 3 years. Maybe it was time to become who they wanted me to be. I went to bed early. My alarm set for 8 a.m. The party started at 2 o'clock. And I had my schedule planned to the minute. Hair appointment at 10, final dress fitting at noon. Arrive fashionably late at 2:15. I fell asleep imagining Amanda's surprise when I walked in looking elegant and appropriate. Maybe, just maybe, her parents would finally see me as worthy of their son. Maybe Eleanor would even have a real conversation with me. I should have paid more attention to the weather forecast. Saturday morning, I woke to the kind of December storm Connecticut is famous for. Ice pelted my windows. My phone buzzed with weather alerts warning of dangerous roads. The salon canceled my hair appointment when they lost power. The alteration shop flooded, delaying my dress pickup. By noon, I was still in my bathrobe, staring out at freezing rain turning the world into a sheet of glass, wondering if the party would even happen. At 12:30, David called. Mom, are you still planning to come? The roads are pretty bad. In the background, I heard Amanda's voice. Tell her the party's still on. Everyone's already here. Everyone except me. The realization hit harder than it should have. I was the only one fighting the storm to get there. I'll be there, I told David firmly. I wouldn't miss it with no professional help. I did my own hair and makeup. My hands trembled as I applied lipstick. Nerves, I told myself. Not age. When I slipped into the burgundy dress, I caught my reflection in the mirror, and for a moment, I actually felt elegant. Almost like I belonged, until my eyes landed on my winter coat, the only one I owned. Practical, bulky, and far from sophisticated. At 1:30, I left my apartment, giving myself extra time to drive carefully. The roads were slick but manageable as long as you moved slow. Traffic crawled, every driver just as cautious as the next. Everything was going smoothly until I turned onto the winding road that led to the Whitman estate. That's when I saw her. An elderly woman stood beside a luxury sedan with its hood up. Her coat looked expensive, but she had no hat, and ice had begun to settle on her silver hair. I could have kept driving. The sensible thing would have been to call AAA for her and continue on to the party. I was already running late, and stopping would only make me later. But I couldn't, not in weather like this. I pulled over and rolled down my window. Do you need help? She turned toward me, and I got my first good look at her face. She must have been in her late 70s, with the kind of bone structure that told you she had been strikingly beautiful in her youth. Her blue eyes were sharp and alert, not helpless or confused as I'd expected. My car won't start, she said calmly. The engine just died. I suppose I should have called for help and waited. But there was something about her quiet dignity, the way she handled the situation without panic, that reminded me of my own mother. Let me take a look, I heard myself say. Getting out of my car meant sacrificing any hope of arriving at the party looking pristine. The freezing rain soaked through my coat in seconds, and I felt my carefully styled hair start to wilt. The woman watched silently as I popped her hood and bent over the engine. I wasn't a mechanic, but Frank had taught Me the basics before he died. I squinted through the icy mist. Battery terminals are corroded, I called out. Raising my voice over the wind, do you have any cola in the car? Her brows lifted. As if she thought I'd lost my mind. Cola, I repeated, Coca-Cola. Works great for cleaning corrosion. Emergency trick my husband taught me, to my surprise. She reached into her sleek, expensive handbag and pulled out a small glass bottle of Coke. Of course, someone like her would have that. As I poured the soda over the battery terminals, I couldn't help but laugh inwardly at the absurdity of the scene. Two women in formal dresses, battling the elements to perform roadside car surgery in the middle of an ice storm. You're going to ruin your dress, she observed. Already am, I said, scraping at the corrosion with my car key. Sometimes you just have to put helping people ahead of staying clean. We waited a moment for the cola to work. She studied me closely, then asked, where are you headed? Christmas party, I said lightly, careful not to mention it was my first real invitation into the Whitman family's inner circle. My sons-in-law's very formal affair, and you stopped to help a stranger? I shrugged. Couldn't leave you stranded. Family events come around every year, but if I left someone in danger, that would haunt me forever. Her assessing gaze softened at that for the first time. Her sharp blue eyes warmed into something that looked almost like approval. Try starting it now, I suggested. The engine turned over smoothly. She gave me a smile so genuine it startled me. You're very kind. Not many people would have stopped, especially dressed for a party like yours. I looked down at myself. My coat was soaked through. Grease streaked my burgundy dress. My hair was plastered to my forehead. The elegant woman I'd worked so hard to create was gone. Well, I can't exactly show up looking like this. I tried to laugh, though disappointment weighed heavy in my chest. Maybe I should just head home. Nonsense, she said firmly. Anyone worth knowing will understand that you chose kindness over vanity. And if they don't, they're not worth knowing. She reached into her purse again and handed me a card. Heavy cardstock, embossed in gold. Eleanor Whitman. My heart stopped. I whispered, you're Amanda's grandmother. Her blue eyes so much like Amanda's, but infinitely warmer, met mine. I am, and you must be Margaret Sullivan, David's mother. She studied my shocked expression. I've been very curious to meet the woman who raised such a good man. My mind raced. This was Eleanor Whitman, the woman Amanda dismissed as uninvolved, as someone who let others handle the business. And here she was, standing before me, sharper and more present than anyone in that family gave her credit for. I had no idea, I stammered. I'm quite sure you didn't, she said, her tone layered with meaning I couldn't fully grasp. Then she smiled faintly. Shall we head to the party together? I think you'll find it more interesting than you expected. Following Eleanor's car up the winding drive, I tried to process what had just happened. After 3 years of carefully curating myself for the Whitmans, I'd finally been seen exactly as I was by the one person whose opinions seemed to matter most. The estate rose before us like a movie set, glowing with thousands of Christmas lights. Elegant silhouettes glided past grand windows. Valets in pressed coats waited under the portico, ready to take our cars. Mrs. Whitman, one young man said, startled as he opened her door. We weren't expecting you for another hour. Your driver called, said the roads were too dangerous. I decided to drive myself, she replied simply. Another valet approached my modest sedan, confusion flickering across his face before he forced a polite smile. Now I understood her driver had cancelled, but Eleanor had insisted on coming anyway. That's why she'd been stranded. Inside the grand foyer, crystal light glinted off marble floors. I caught my reflection in the tall mirror and winced. My lipstick was smudged. My hair clung in damp strands. The grease stains on my dress stood out under the chandelier like neon signs. Eleanor Patricia Whitman descended the staircase with regal poise, her gown shimmering with understated wealth. She stopped short when her eyes landed on me. And Margaret, how unexpected. The way she said unexpected made it sound more like unwelcome. Margaret helped me with car trouble, Eleanor explained smoothly, quite resourcefully, I might add. Amanda emerged from the parlor, her gown surely worth more than my monthly rent. Her smile froze as her eyes scanned me from head to toe. Oh my goodness, Margaret. What happened to you? Before I could answer, David rushed over. I saw the war on his face, embarrassment clashing with genuine concern. Mom, are you okay? You look like you've been in an accident. I'm fine, honey. I just stopped to help someone with car trouble. You could have called AAA, Amanda said sharply, her voice laced with exasperation. Now you'll need to freshen up before meeting everyone. As we entered the main parlor, the room fell silent. Conversations died mid-sentence as Connecticut's elite turned their eyes on me, the bedraggled woman who had somehow slipped past their velvet rope. Every stare, every raised eyebrow, every whisper pressed against me like a weight. This was exactly what I had feared. To be judged, dismissed, and humiliated, Amanda leaned toward David. Her stage whisper cutting through the silence, just loud enough for everyone to hear David. This is embarrassing, everyone's staring, maybe she should go home, change, and come back later. Amanda's stage whisper cut through the parlor like a blade. Before David could respond, her father stepped forward. Richard Whitman carried the kind of commanding presence that came with old money and old power. His tone was polite yet cool. "Margaret," he said, "how good of you to join us. Though perhaps you'd be more comfortable if you left to get cleaned up, we'd completely understand." The message was clear. I wasn't welcome, not like this, maybe not at all. My cheeks burned with shame. I opened my mouth to excuse myself when Eleanor's voice sliced through the silence. "Actually, Richard," she said evenly, "I think everyone should hear about Margaret's good deed before she changes clothes." Her tone was mild, but the shift in the room was immediate. Every head turned, the air itself seemed to pause. "After all," Eleanor added, "kindness is so very rare these days," and that's when I realized Eleanor Whitman was about to transform my humiliation into something else entirely. "Margaret didn't just help me with car trouble," Eleanor announced, her voice carrying the weight of someone used to being heard. "She sacrificed her appearance at this very party to make sure I wasn't stranded in dangerous weather. That is the kind of character we should be celebrating." I stood there, dripping on their priceless Persian rug, feeling like an exhibit under glass. But Eleanor wasn't finished. "How many of you would have stopped?" she asked, her piercing blue gaze sweeping across the crowd. "How many of you would have chosen to help a stranger instead of rushing to make a good impression?" The silence was suffocating. Not a single hand raised, not a single voice spoke. I caught sight of Amanda, her smile tight, her jaw clenched, her expression sour. "Mother," Richard began, but Eleanor lifted one elegant hand. "I'm not finished, Richard." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "Margaret, would you mind telling everyone exactly what you did to help me?" Dozens of eyes pinned me where I stood. Part of me longed to vanish, but another part wanted to see where Eleanor was leading this. "I used Coca-Cola," I said simply, "to clean the corrosion off her battery terminals. It's a trick my late husband taught me." Murmurs rippled across the room. Someone even giggled. "Coca-Cola," Eleanor repeated, her voice thoughtful. "Practical knowledge, applied without hesitation to solve a problem. No concern for expensive clothes or perfect hair, just immediate action." She stepped forward, moving to stand at my side. At 78 years old, she still commanded the room with a power none of them dared challenge. "That," she said, her voice soft but firm, "is the very kind of thinking that built this family's fortune, the willingness to get your hands dirty when something needs fixing." Amanda's heels clicked as she stepped forward, her smile stretched tight. "Grandmother, perhaps we should let Margaret freshen up before." "Before what, Amanda?" Eleanor's voice was still pleasant, but laced with steel. "Before she makes us look bad." Amanda froze. "I think Margaret looks exactly like someone who puts helping others before her own comfort." Eleanor continued, "And that, my dear, is quite beautiful." Heat spread through my chest, warming me more than the roaring fire ever could. For the first time in 3 years, someone in that family was defending me. "Now then," Eleanor said briskly, turning back to the room, "I believe Margaret deserves to enjoy this party exactly as she is. Authenticity is always more valuable than artifice." Richard cleared his throat awkwardly. "Of course, Mother." "Margaret, please make yourself comfortable." But I saw the calculation flicker in his eyes. Eleanor had just placed me under her protection, and he knew better than to oppose her. Conversations resumed around us, but the glances I caught were no longer dismissive. They were curious, measuring, interested. In a single moment, Eleanor Whitman had elevated me. I leaned closer and whispered, "Thank you." She smiled faintly. For just a second, I caught a flash of something in her expression, strategic satisfaction. "My dear," she said softly, "we're only just getting started. The next are passed in a surreal haze." Word of my heroic roadside rescue spread like wildfire. Suddenly, people who had avoided eye contact were introducing themselves, eager to hear my story. I found myself retelling the scene over and over, each version washing away more of my embarrassment. The freezing rain, the corroded battery, the Coca-Cola trick. "How resourceful," exclaimed a woman dripping in pearls, "worth more than my car." I wouldn't have known the first thing to do. David appeared at my elbow, concern still written across his face. "Mom, are you sure you're okay? You don't have to stay if you don't want to." "Actually," I said with a small laugh, surprised to hear myself mean it, "I'm having a lovely time." "Your grandmother-in-law is remarkable. She's always been sharp," David admitted quietly. "I've tried to tell Amanda that grandmother isn't nearly as uninvolved as she pretends to be. She notices everything." So David had seen it too. That realization soothed something in me. Amanda joined us, her smile perfectly controlled, her tone neutral. Grandmother can be very protective of people she takes a liking to. Her words made it sound like more of a warning than a compliment. Margaret, Eleanor's voice floated across the room. Come, there's someone I'd like you to meet. She led me to a distinguished man in his 60s. This is James Morrison, our family attorney and a dear friend. James, this is Margaret Sullivan, the woman I told you about. James clasped my hand warmly. Eleanor's been singing your praises. Says you've got excellent instincts for solving problems, though. I just helped with the car, I said, still bewildered by the attention. Sometimes the simplest solutions, Eleanor said meaningfully, are the most elegant. The two of them exchanged a look layered, knowing something important was being left unsaid, and I had no idea what it was before I could ask. A voice rang out announcing that dinner was served. The dining room could have swallowed my entire apartment. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above a table dressed with enough china and silver to stock a boutique. I found myself seated between Eleanor and a charming elderly gentleman who introduced himself as our retired ambassador. Margaret helped me today, Eleanor announced to our end of the table as the first course arrived. She demonstrated exactly the kind of practical wisdom and selflessness that built the foundations of success. How wonderful, the ambassador's wife said warmly. It's refreshing to meet someone who actually does something useful instead of just talking about it. Throughout dinner, Eleanor kept me in the conversation, asking about everything from community volunteer work to Frank's carpentry business. She didn't just ask, she listened, leaning in, eyes sharp with interest. Frank sounds remarkable, she said softly when I told her how he'd taught neighborhood kids woodworking, passing on skills for free, building things, teaching skills, helping others succeed. That's real legacy. Her words filled me with unexpected pride, but across the table, I noticed Amanda glancing nervously at her father, and Richard's jaw tightening each time Eleanor praised me. Something was building. I had the uneasy sense I was about to be in the center of it. After dinner, Eleanor suggested we move to the library for coffee and brandy. The library was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, worn leather chairs around a roaring fire, oil portraits of stern ancestors glaring down from gilded frames. This, Eleanor confided as she sank into a wingback chair that might as well have been a throne, is where the real conversations happen. The smaller circle included Richard, Patricia, Amanda, David, James Morrison, and a handful of trusted family friends. James took a discreet position where he could watch everything. Mother, Richard began carefully, his voice measured. It's been a lovely evening, but perhaps we should discuss the quarterly reports tomorrow. Actually, Eleanor interrupted smoothly. I've been reviewing those. Quite concerning reading, if I'm honest. Amanda and Richard exchanged a sharp glance. My stomach tightened. This was no ordinary family chat. The company's doing well, Richard said quickly. Strong profits, steady growth. The restructuring I put in place has been very successful. Financially successful, yes, Eleanor said calmly. But tell me, when was the last time Whitman Industries contributed meaningfully to the community that built its success? Mother, community relations is expensive overhead. It's not overhead, Richard. It's responsibility. Eleanor rose and walked to a portrait near the fireplace. A woman in her 40s gazed down in simple elegance, sharp-eyed and determined. This is me in 1969, Eleanor said quietly, the year I started Whitman Industries with a $5,000 loan and a rented storefront in Hartford. The room froze. I was 23, a young mother with big dreams and even bigger determination. Everyone told me women couldn't build successful businesses, so I decided to prove them wrong. Amanda's face drained of color. Grandmother, what are you saying? I'm saying I built this company from nothing. Every contract, every expansion, every success came from my vision, my decisions, my willingness to work 18-hour days solving problems no one else could. Richard shifted defensive. Mother, we all know you were instrumental in the early days. Not instrumental, Richard, foundational. I didn't help build Whitman Industries. I am Whitman Industries. Her voice was calm, but steel-threaded every word. Your grandfather Harold was a wonderful husband and father, she continued, but he was a high school teacher. The business came entirely from me. Her gaze shifted to me, and something in her eyes made my breath catch. Margaret reminded me today of who I used to be, who I still am. Under decades of letting others take credit for my work, someone who solves problems, someone who helps without hesitation, that is what built this family's fortune. The implications hit me like a blow. This wasn't about dinner. This was about power, legacy, truth. You built the company yourself, I whispered, piecing it together. Not your husband, not your father-in-law, you. Eleanor smiled, and for the first time all evening it was entirely genuine. Smart woman, yes. Harold supported me, but the business was mine alone. The silence was deafening. Amanda looked faint. But everyone always talks about grandfather's business legacy, David said softly. The founding vision, the family tradition. I let people believe Harold had built the company. Eleanor said matter-of-factly, it was easier in those days. A woman-owned business faced scrutiny, discrimination, resistance. Letting Harold be the face while I did the work was pragmatic. Richard's face burned crimson. Mother, you can't what? Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Tell the truth about my own company? Remind this family that its privilege rests on the back of a woman who worked harder than any of you can imagine, who treated people with dignity while building an empire. She moved behind my chair, resting one light hand on my shoulder. Today, Margaret demonstrated those same qualities: practical problem solving, sacrificing for others, choosing character over appearance. Qualities this family has let slip away. Amanda finally found her voice. Grandmother, this is hardly fair. We can't all be automotive repair experts. It's not about automotive repair, Amanda. Eleanor replied, her tone patient but firm. It's about values. When faced with the choice between helping someone in need and protecting your own comfort, what do you choose? Her words fell like a weight across the room. I thought of every interaction over the past 3 years, every slight, every dismissal, every subtle reminder that I didn't belong. Margaret has been part of this family for 3 years. Eleanor continued, 3 years of being treated like an inconvenience. Like David made some kind of mistake. That's not, Amanda began, isn't it? Eleanor's brows arched. When was the last time you invited Margaret to anything beyond obligatory holidays? When did you ask about her life, her interests, her well-being? David's face fell. I tried to encourage more inclusion. But you let it slide because confronting it was uncomfortable, Eleanor said gently. Her gaze swept the room again, pinning each of them in place. That ends tonight. That's human nature, David, Eleanor said gently. But it's not acceptable. She walked to the massive desk in the corner and picked up a thick folder. James has been helping me prepare for this conversation for several months. I've decided it's time I resume a more active role in company operations. Richard shot to his feet. Mother, the company is running perfectly fine. Financially, yes. Ethically, no. Eleanor's smile was sharp. We've become exactly what I never wanted, a business that prioritizes profit over people. The room erupted in shocked voices, but Eleanor raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. Margaret, she said, her eyes sparkling with purpose, I have a proposition for you. It took me a moment to realize she was looking at me. I'd like to offer you a consulting position with Whitman Industries, head of community engagement and values implementation, a 6-month trial starting at $75,000, with the potential for a permanent executive role if things go well. I'm pretty sure my jaw hit the floor. Around the room, I saw faces just as stunned. Eleanor, I don't understand. I managed. It's simple, she said. Whitman Industries has lost touch with the community values that built it. You understand people. Margaret, you help without being asked. You solve problems without complaining. You treat everyone with dignity, no matter their status. That's exactly what we need. She opened the folder, pulling out several documents. I've been planning this restructuring for months. I just needed the right person to help me lead it. Today confirmed what I already suspected. You have the instincts this family has forgotten. This is insane, Richard exploded. You can't just create positions based on car repair skills. Eleanor's gaze could have frozen stone. Richard, under your leadership, employee satisfaction has plummeted. Community involvement has disappeared. Charitable giving has dropped to the legal minimum. Margaret represents exactly the values we need to restore. She turned back to me. The position would involve building partnerships, overseeing corporate responsibility, and helping shape a workplace culture that values people as much as profit. You'd work directly with me, at least at first. My head spun. 6 hours ago, I'd been worried about whether my dress looked formal enough. Now Eleanor Whitman was offering me a chance to reshape how a multi-million-dollar company operated. But I have no corporate consulting experience, I protested weakly. You have the only experience that matters, Eleanor said firmly. Caring about people, solving problems, the rest can be learned, character cannot. Amanda found her voice strained and tight. Grandmother, this is very sudden. Perhaps Margaret needs time to think. Actually, I interrupted, surprising even myself. I'd like to accept the trial position. The words tumbled out before I fully processed them, but they felt right. This wasn't about a paycheck or validation. It was about finally being valued for who I was and having a chance to make a difference. Eleanor's smile lit the entire room. Excellent, James, draft the agreement. Wait, David said, his eyes full of concern. Mom, are you sure? This is a huge change. I looked at my son. Really looked. Beneath the worry was something else, respect, pride, honey. I said softly, I've spent 3 years trying to fit into a world that didn't want me. Now I have a chance to help that world become better. How could I say no? Richard cleared his throat, stiff as marble. And my role in all this, you remain CEO. Eleanor said calmly. But with restored board oversight and a renewed focus on the values this company was founded on. Consider it a course correction, not a takeover. She glanced around the stunned room. Then back at me, Margaret. You reminded me tonight that true wealth isn't measured in profit margins. It's measured in how many lives you improve, how many people you help, and how much good you do with the resources you're given. I stood there in my stained dress and ruined shoes, realizing something profound. I hadn't just been accepted by this family, I'd been entrusted with something larger than myself. Eleanor Whitman, who built an empire from nothing 55 years ago, had seen something in me I'd almost forgotten existed. Not just the woman who'd helped with car trouble, but someone capable of helping on a much greater scale. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. I had arrived as an outsider. I was leaving as a partner and rebuilding a legacy. Some Christmas parties change your outfit. This one changed my entire future. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've ever had a moment that changed your path completely, share it in the comments. Your story matters.